Hey guys, welcome to the channel. In today's video we are talking about Immortals of AVEUM. This is Fossil21. I love playing games and I love making videos, so if you guys like what you see, drop a like on the video and subscribe to the page. Also, before we get too far into it, I want to put a spoiler warning here, as we will be talking about and showing things that are definitely spoilery to the story, so here's your warning. So Immortals of AVEUM, honestly I think it's pretty great, which is kind of a bit unfortunate because I feel like it'll definitely get slept on. With it launching between Armored Core 6 and Starfield next week, it definitely has its flaws for sure, but overall I thought it was a great experience. The story was actually pretty decent, and despite how simple the combat was, it was surprisingly fun. And with it being one of the first games on the Unreal Engine 5, the game looked really great. Let's start off with the story. The story here is very MCU-like, and overall has like a Marvel-esque feel to it. From its very cinematic fights and cutscenes, even right down to like the jokes, it's all feels very much like Marvel-type humor. You play as Jack, who is a Treyarch and has the ability to control all three magic colors, whereas most people can just use the one. Jack, after discovering he's a Treyarch, is immediately thrown into this new life, fighting on the front lines. There's like this giant magic war that's been going on for a very long time, and Jack and his companions have to stop it, because if they don't, it could end all magic, and I want to say end the world. It's a very similar story we've seen many times before, but I think it works really well here, in part due to the great voice acting. There are some times where the actual dialogue itself is not that good, or kind of cringy to be honest, but all the voice actors totally embrace it, and all of their performances I thought were really good. The humor I feel like is kind of hit or miss. Some parts were kind of meh, and then there are other parts that were actually pretty funny. As I mentioned earlier, it is very MCU or Marvel-like when it comes to the way it presents its humor, so if you're not really into that, you might not like it here. This is a first-person shooter. There are three main types of magics that you'll use: blue, red, and green. Blue magic is more of your long range, more accurate shots. Red magic, like a shotgun, for up close doing tons of damage. And green magic, which is like your automatic weapons that will shoot a ton of projectiles. And honestly, all of the shooting felt really good. All of the colors felt unique and different to use. And even within the three different colors, there are three different variants for each color, allowing for up to 9 different possibilities you can have in your arsenal. Along with the magic, you have a few magical items called totems that can help you as you go throughout AVEUM. The shield was actually my personal favorite, and it just looked really cool throwing up the shield. It allows you to have a 360 bubble that's around you, and as the shield's up, you can also shoot through it, shooting enemies at the same time. You also have a chain that you can grab smaller enemies and pull them closer. It also acts as a grapple as you explore the area. A red lens that is used to stun enemies for a short period of time, and is also used to create a laser to solve puzzles. And the last one is a vial that shoots like this green ooze out that slows down enemies and objects. And even though all of these on their own sound fairly simple, when they're all put together, it actually made the gameplay very fun. On top of that, what made the gameplay even better is that as you progress throughout the game, enemies will eventually have certain shields or can only be taken down by certain colors of magic. So you had to be very reactive, switching on the fly to be able to take down enemies. As some enemies, I learned where you're shooting blue magic and they're not going down because you have to use green magic to take them down. Think of it as very similar to like the shields in Hogwarts Legacy, where you had to use a certain color of the magic to take down the shield. Very similar. I played the game on Immortal difficulty, and that is kind of where my first complaint is. For about half of the game felt fine. The enemies did hit harder and were a tad harder to take down, but after about halfway through, everything just hit like a freaking truck. And if I wasn't careful or too reckless, I would get taken down easily within like 2 shots. The game does have a skill tree that corresponds with your magic, red, blue, and green, all of which add various buffs and stats to your magic. There's also like this weird like gear system that I didn't particularly care for. The different sigils that you get are what I mentioned earlier, the 3 different variants for your magic. You can have 3 sigils, 1 blue, 1 green, and 1 red. The game also has rings and amulets that you use for the more or less the same purpose, to give yourself different stat increases and buffs, all of which can be leveled up. And I don't know, like I said, I particularly didn't really care too much. I didn't look too much into the stats. The game wasn't too hard, although I said, you know, on Immortal difficulty, the latter half of the game was quite difficult. There are quite a few of bosses that you'll encounter throughout the game. most of which become standard enemies or even mini-bosses later down the line. And if I'm being honest, I don't really remember too many other than the really unique ones. For instance, early in the game you fight a dragon, which was really cool. I feel most were just kind of random fodder, or like I said, they just become standard, either mini bosses or standard enemies later in the game. That said, most of the story bosses were all really epic, cinematic in their presentation, but outside a handful, many were forgettable. I played the game on the PlayStation 5, and for the most part, the game looked absolutely amazing. There's a ton of really cool set pieces that are like, hey, look at this type of view or moment. For example, there's even a whole battle where you do on the outside of a giant robot. Everything just looks really cool and really shiny for some reason. It's like all futuristic, but not at the same time, and somehow everything has to be shiny. It actually reminds me a lot of Godfall, which, I mean, you also go to quite a few different biomes, and all of which I thought looked really great. The unfortunate part is that even though everything looked really good and everything was like shiny, there was nothing that really made it stand out other than a few like little set pieces here and there. Also, for the most part, the game ran really smooth. I didn't run into any glitches or bugs that I noticed, and if there were, I personally didn't see them. The game does, for the most part, have a decent frame rate. And surprisingly, I only really noticed frame drops when I was going to a new area. There are many times where I was fighting tons of enemies or many waves of enemies, and the game, for the most part, ran at a stable frame rate. Although there were occasional dips here and there, but it was nothing too dramatic. Overall, I had a really good time with Immortals of AVEUM, which is kind of a bit unfortunate because I feel like a lot of people are gonna sleep on this game. I mean, I get it, 2023 has just been jam-packed full of bangers this year. I'm barely even having time to play them all myself, but I do think this is one of the good ones. I think the shooting and the magic is both really well done. The story was good, and I actually cared what happened to the characters, and that is why I'm going to give Immortals of AVEUM a 7 out of 10. I think this game has some shortcomings, but after rolling the credits, I overall enjoyed my time with the game. Now, do I think you should play this game? Yeah, absolutely. If you got the time and you have the money, I would say go for it. But do I think you should run out and play this right now at full price? Maybe not. I mean, if you really want to, by all means, but with so many other big games coming out this year and all these other ones fighting for your attention and fighting for your money, I would say it might be better off spent somewhere else. At least for the time being. It was a great game, but with games like Starfield and Armored Core 6, just to name the two that are right by this one, it makes it a hard sell. It's also an EA game, so I would imagine it's going to come to Game Pass sooner rather than later. But guys, that's going to be it for the video. If you guys made it this far, you guys are freaking awesome, and I appreciate your support. Don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the page, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.